The Rockpile Report.
Buffalo, New York is going to be the epicenter of every stargazing nerd's wet dream.
With Buffalo Bills season ticket holder, Drew Geter.
If there was ever a time to break out Skyline Chili, it's when the Bills are 5-2, right?
The Rockpile Report. The pettiest, hardest drinking Bills podcast.
To another edition of the Quarter Zip Pull-Up Report. I am your host, Bill's season ticket holder, Drew Geter. That's my producer, Chris Kruger, and I feel like he felt a little FOMO from last week. He's starting to cop my style here.
I had a quarter zip on last week for sure. So
yep, 2 weeks in a row, folks. 2 weeks in a row. This is the Ascot Hour with Drew and Chris, where we dress more formally than usual and pretend that we have wider vocabularies than we normally do.
Yeah, I wanted to start with this. Jessica and I went to a establishment earlier this week for dinner, and I got to give a shout out to the men of Cheektowaga.
Oh my! You're one of the. Yeah. Hang on, that's a rarity. You do realize that anybody from Cheektowaga, if you're giving them a shout out and it's not related to slow pitch softball, I almost hesitate to ask what the hell you could be congratulating them for.
Well, so we went to dinner because I got to go to an event. I have a suit, but apparently Jessica found out like last minute it's a black tie event.
So you need a tux.
So I need, or a black suit. So we went for that, and then we went to eat at an establishment in Cheektowaga, and we walk in and get seated, and within 1 minute, because we're near the bar, within 1 to 2 minutes, we could tell something was up at the bar. And apparently it was a very bad first date. Like, you could tell that this was a horrid date just on the outside within 2 minutes.
Now, let me interrupt this. Chris and his wife are like LeBron James and Luka Doncic of people watching. They're amazing at it.
Oh, yeah. We noticed Jessica, the way I was sitting, my right side was to the bar. So we couldn't, I mean, at least me, I couldn't pick up well, like, certain things that they were talking about, but it had a little bit of a vibe of Ron and Tammy at the diner where they're yelling at each other and then like
making out. But the guy was like pretty handsy and she wasn't reciprocating that. And there were a couple, first of all, that looked like they'd been there since 4:30 and it's like 7:00 at night. That we're eating, and like he went to the bathroom maybe like twice, and people at the bar, which were all men, noticed this and were like, "You cool?
You cool? If shit needs to go down,
we'll throw this guy right out of here.
Beat the fuck out of this guy."
I'm not gonna lie, I've had that conversation where you're just like, does that guy need to go?
Yeah.
Then that's the question. It's just, does he need to go?
The kicker was we were both finishing up around the same time, and they were a little ahead of us. And he pulled a Drew Geter move and complained about the bill and made a slight scene. And this woman was embarrassed. And then he ended up complaining. They worked that out. And because it's like a first, I'm assuming they met on some app. So they met at this establishment and then he left. And like she cried at the bar in front of like maybe 8 other dudes were at the bar. And then this
idiot left, and then the other guys at the bar were like, because she wasn't ready to leave because she was pretty lit. Took her water, sat with some of the guys at this establishment,
and they literally just became a crying shoulder for this.
Yeah, and even Jessica said something to her on the way out when we got up and left. She's but Jessica and I were, I think mentally we were prepared to have like a pretty decent conversation at dinner, and then this
just
dominated the whole group. Like we're not even like conversing because
you want to be a part of something. You see history happening, and you're like, I'm never going to be this close to this event again.
It was like 4:00 on my watch, so like I couldn't just keep turning my head and looking. Like Jessica had the view of it, and it's like every 2 minutes, like she's just giving me updates, and it was insane. I was like, this better be posted on Reddit somewhere, but. Chris, it's funny that guy had Drew gear moves about enjoying his time at an establishment while also complaining.
What I love is the idea that, like, first of all, bad dates now, like bad dates back in the day. I remember pre-smartphone, taking a girl out to dinner. We sat down. The place was called La Isidoro on Camp Road in Hamburg. I used to go there all the time. They kind of knew me a little bit just by face. I would go in there a lot. They were always nice to me. And I met a girl at a party, and we'd both been drinking a lot. So it was like, oh, hey, she was cute, and oh, he's funny. And then the problem is you sober up and you go, well, this girl's not funny. It was like, oh, she doesn't get my sense of humor. And she goes, this guy's not that cute. This all sucks. So we sit down, we order, right? This is what a bad date used to be like. You sit down, you order. I start making jokes. She's not laughing. In fact, at one point, she corrected me and said, that's not funny. And I was like, uh-oh. It's going to be a long, slow death over here. We put in our orders for food. We had gotten drinks. We put in our food order. Before she could bring out the garlic bread for the table, the waitress, the girl just kept checking her phone. Again, not smartphone, but she kept looking at it. And the conversation is just dying on the rocks like the boat in Step Brothers. Like, this thing has crashed. It's a debacle. And finally I look at her and I go, is there somewhere else you need to be right now? And she kind of laughed because I said it in a joking manner. And I was like, look, this thing stinks. And she laughed, and I was like, is there somewhere else you'd rather be? And she goes, well, my friends are just out. It's whatever. I'll go, you know what? Go. Just go meet them. She goes, okay, well, I'll leave the thing. I go, no, because I'm going to eat whatever the fuck you ordered. Get out of here. And so then the waitress comes out, and she goes, oh, your friend, I saw her leave. Is everything okay? I go, oh, yeah, I kicked her out. She's gone. She goes, oh, well, do you want me to see if the kitchen can stop? I go, no. I heard her order chicken parm. You make that and you bring it out here to me. And I sat there at that table with like dual wielding dinners like a king and just drank and ate to my face and then met Davini out at happy hour.
It's insane. That's my only, that was
or like at late night at Doc Sullivan's.
That was my only ability in the dating market is social awareness of when you're not liked and when things aren't going well and knowing when to leave and go, oh, this is the last time I'm going to see this person.
It is funny. And it's also being able to take things in stride and being able to read, but also being able to read the room, which that guy clearly cannot. If you're on a date and it's not going well, first of all, if you're intoxicated at any point, rule of thumb, you don't get to complain about anything. You shut your mouth and sign whatever's on the tab.
Yeah.
Now, if you're sober, different story. Maybe you got a beef, you got this, or something happened. Even then, I try not to complain at restaurants because I just don't care enough.
Yeah.
But you have watched me harangue a pizzeria or two.
Oh, yeah. While eating pizza.
And here's the best part, people. What Chris gets at, what bothers him the most is that when something happens that offends me in that way, I don't just refuse to order from there again. But I'm also not going to ask them to take the pizza back. I'm not going to ask them for store credit. I don't want anything from you. What I want to hear is an acknowledgement that you did something wrong and that you're going to try not to do it again. And it makes me one of the worst people on earth. Chris has had to sit there, like, not making eye contact with me while I talk to a pizzeria about the mistakes they made while I'm eating the food.
Yes.
They're like, oh, well, if you want, we'll come get it. No. I'm in. I just need you to know. I just want you to know. Like I'm doing them a favor, Chris.
Yeah, that date for sure needs to be somewhere on Reddit from her, if she knows how to use Reddit or the internet in general. Because I would personally, I wanted to stay like another half hour to get the full story from her because it was what I was watching was so entertaining and embarrassing to the public.
It still takes me back to the days you used to be on Tinder. Man, those were the stories you would tell me.
Yeah.
Guys, we could do a whole podcast just about Chris's dating stories. He goes, oh, I was driving Uber and I made out with the chick on New Year's Eve. I go, did you get her number or ever talk to her again? No.
Yeah.
It's the best. It's the best of times, the worst of times. And unfortunately this week, guys, it's the worst of times. It's NFL Combine week.
Hand size.
Chris, go ahead and hit me with the news update. The Buffalo Bills news update, people. It's Combine week, and the Buffalo Bills brass are at the NFL Combine in Indy. I'm sure at least a half dozen steaks at St. Elmo's have already been consumed. Is that fair?
Yeah, is that the steakhouse they eat at?
Yes.
In Indiana? It's not Mulligan's?
It's not Mulligan's?
Charles Mulligan's
Charles Mulligan's
Steakhouse?
I hate this time of year. I do because it's all like most of draft season. It's much ado about nothing. Like we all know that most players who go who actually make a name for themselves in the NFL. You figure out what is it, Chris? 250 something players get drafted?
Yes.
And out of those 250 players, not all of them stick in the NFL.
No.
Most of them don't. That's why you end up with 30-year-old starters. You know, that's why Von Miller's still playing at 36 years old. Because not all of these guys are NFL caliber athletes. They were just really good at college football. The problem is you've given them all a podium and you speak about them all in this perfect vacuum of, oh my God, in this one weird thing that has really nothing to do with football. This guy was super fast. Oh, this guy ran a 40 and you should remember this name. If I had $1 for every single guy who told every single analyst who was like, oh man, here's a name to remember. And then that guy did nothing worth remembering ever in the NFL. I'm pretty sure I would have enough to buy what, Chris? A couple bottles of the Eagle Rare.
Yep.
Maybe an E.H. Taylor.
Teron Johnson falls into this category because he wasn't paying attention during a drill.
Well, this is it.
Look how good he is.
And people go, "Oh, that guy! Look, he can't run the gauntlet. He got hit in the face with the ball. What an idiot!" And he goes on to be one of the better nickel cornerbacks in the entire NFL. You can't convince me that most of what's taking place this week actually matters. Even the interviews. You know who aced their interview? Kyer Elam. Kyer Elam showed up with a fucking notebook, and they go, "Oh man, this guy has process written all over him." Processor. They meant food processor. That's what you were supposed to do with this guy. Or like the garbage disposal is where this guy was supposed to be. He wasn't supposed to be playing in the NFL, but you allowed yourself to become enamored with some nonsense interview and some concept of what you thought game preparation was. And now he's stuck on our team this year, Chris. I can't see a world where they cut him because they don't get any cost benefit from cutting him. But I also don't see a world where he's allowed anywhere near the game day roster.
Yeah, you're going to have to try and get a 7th.
I don't even think you can do that. I think you would have to give away a pick in order to get someone to take him in his $4 million contract. That's it. It's over. We got skunked on a first-round draft pick, and it was totally avoidable. It's this time of year that causes those things. I hate it. You know, you get the teams that will use what they learned this week to just confirm biases that they already have. You look at the number, you know, and maybe rightfully so, you know, in our live show this week, which I'm sure you've already heard if you're watching this, or listening to the audio format, if I look up, Chris, all-time Bills draft history, Pro Football Reference. I just want to see the list. Bills draft history. Look it up under Pro Football Reference. I want to see the list of players because, people are talking about how the Bills need to invest more in the wide receiver position again. That's becoming a thing. And last year it was a rallying cry for the entire fan base of, we need a dynamic wide receiver and we have to draft one now. You start having to ask the question, does this team know how to analyze and evaluate wide receiver talent? This is a team that went out and signed Curtis Samuel to a decent extension.
Decent 3 years.
Decent 3-year deal that they can't get out of until next year, so he's stuck here on the roster. Then, but maybe injuries had a hand to play in that. Fine. I'm willing to listen to some of that. You drafted Khalil Shakir in the 5th round. Yeah, see, 2026 will have an out from under his cap. $3,400 in dead money to avoid a $9 million cap hit. Which is just crazy to me. Oh, no, yeah, $9.7 million, but $3,400 in dead money. We can't cut him this year, so we're stuck with him.
That's $3 million.
Yeah.
$3.5 million in dead.
Yeah. So when you go back to the draft history and you look, I see a Justin Shorter.
What about that touchdown against the Jets?
I see a Justin Shorter. That wasn't against the Jets this year. That was Tyrell Shavers.
Oh.
There's a Justin Shorter in there. There is who else? There's a Khalil Shakir.
Marquez Stevenson.
A Marquez Stevenson. Keep going down. I want to see in the Beane era, Isaiah Hodgins.
Injuries.
He had one decent run for the New York Giants, and then Nary was heard of again. And now I don't even know if he has a job anymore with that team. What else? They didn't draft one in 2019. They took 2 of them in 2018, which was Beane's first draft. Ray McLeod and Austin Proell. Neither of them, like Austin Proell doesn't have any NFL statistics, but you drafted him. Not a single NFL statistic. It just makes you question whether or not they know how to evaluate the position. But at the same time, they're going to go to the combine and they're going to look at guys and go, oh, yeah, see, that's why we want him. No, yeah, you see, we the guy with the 40 and we hope he runs slow, like the Gabe Davis conversation. It's like, okay, but you know how close Gabe Davis was to being nothing? And then you made him kind of something, and it seems like he's gone back to being nothing again.
Isn't that the whole point for Gabe? You draft somebody like a Gabe Davis because you have, Superman at quarterback. So he made Gabe Davis to get paid, and Jacksonville paid him, and then he reverted back because he didn't have an elite quarterback throwing to him. That's all the process is for drafting a wide receiver for Beane, is you just hope Josh. If you can't be a receiver with Josh Allen, you shouldn't be a receiver in the league.
And so today I saw a tweet that was like, name 2 people who have the craziest beef. And I just put out a picture. It's me and the NFL Combine logo. I fucking hate it. But the reason I hate it is, like, I'm not being facetious. I'm not trying to be like, I'm going to run counter to what everyone else is doing because I want to be edgy. No. I legitimately think it's all overblown, because if you liked a player's tape in college, all you're doing is coming here to verify a handful of things about him. It's the medical check, an interview, which could actually do more harm than good, because you could talk yourself out of certain guys. You take a look at it. I saw a tweet the other day.
Isn't it a 15-minute time limit for the interview?
Yeah, so it's 15 minutes. What can you really, Chris, inside of, you know what I've had people tell me? A guy who we call Uncle Pete once interviewed me for a job doing collections. And when I left, I didn't even make it out of the parking lot before they had called me to offer me a job. And then 2 years later, when he's like, you were drinking in the office? I was like, yeah, it's chaos over here. He goes, you keep hitting your numbers, but you're the worst employee I've ever had. And I remember the one night he was frustrated and he goes, do you know that when I interviewed you, I walked out of there going, I've struck gold. This guy is going to be the greatest employee I've ever had. He goes, and then this happens. Not only that, but then one time we set a fire in the parking lot at work. Like a massive, 40-foot by 30-foot fire. Burned up a whole piece of the median. I had to write an apology letter like it was high school. It was hysterical. It's how you know collections is it's borderline a real job. Because if I can't get fired for that, I don't know what you can get fired for.
I mean, you could look at it because you do a 15-minute combine interview. It's similar to meeting somebody for a first date on the internet and then having them ruin your whole night.
Exactly. This is what we're talking about. I love the tie-in. It's that exact situation where you're like, well, this is going to go well. And then it just ruins everything for you. Why? Because we had a 15-minute chat on some app that told us things were going to be great. This is a person I can have a lot of fun with. That's what the NFL Combine is to me. And I hate it. Now, with that said, obviously our coaches are there, our GMs are there, and everybody gets a microphone shoved in their face. So there were some interesting things that did come out of that some of which I think is worth talking about. McDermott and Beane addressing the media. The first thing I wanted to point out, Chris, was the other day, Andrew Berry, the GM of the Browns, went on right before Brandon Beane. And so his media availability took place right before that. And again, the guy remains adamant he is not trading Myles Garrett. He has no inclination to do that, and he remains adamant. Now, is that just a tactic to drive up trade prices?
Possibly.
Is that just a thing of trying to scare off teams that are just kicking the tires? Like, hey, don't bother wasting my time with a lowball offer just because you think you can squeeze me, because you're going to have to sweet talk me into this from doing it. Because I'm going to publicly say things that tell you I don't want to make the move, even if deep down I know I might have to. And I found it interesting that they went from that conversation to then immediately after talking to Brandon Beane. And Brandon Beane comes out and has the comment about how, I'm a lot of things, like I say on the golf course, I'm a lot of things, but I'm not scared isn't one of them. When talked about how aggressive he would be, or if he was worried or scared about using significant draft capital to go get a player if he felt like the trade was worth it. I feel like that's the obligatory answer you have to give. If there's a GM who's telling you, hey, I have no interest in making a trade for this player that you might want, you double down. You go, nah, okay, he says he's not gonna. Well, guess what? I'm persistent. Persistence is where I pay off. It's very interesting that he's vocally, publicly about this, because Brandon Beane's known to be kind of a straight shooter. We've learned this about him over the years. He was honest about his plan at right tackle. He was honest with his plan at linebacker, even though we here on the podcast mocked him for those things. Now we look like idiots. He also was very upfront with Joe Shane on Hard Knocks when Joe Shane walks up to him and says, hey, you got any interest in trading up to 9? And he just flat out, he goes, I'm looking for extra picks. I don't have enough picks right now. We're not talking about this. So when he's there publicly stating, I have no problem being aggressive, I don't think that's a smokescreen. I believe you can trust him at face value that he probably will go shopping for a move somewhere. Does that make you feel good or bad, Chris? Like, are you nervous about the fact that he's that forward about making a significant trade?
I mean, I think that's his only option if he wants to improve the team as best you can throughout your three mediums of draft, free agency, and trades. It seems like there's a lot of stuff on the market to trade for, and I think that's their best option.
Well, and I also think that it's interesting because more and more names are becoming available. Like, and that's inevitable, right? In the run-up to, this is what happens, and this is why I guess if there's something about this Combine Week that's valuable, it's that this is the tampering capital of the world right now. And it's why this week, all of a sudden, you see players like Michael Clemens from the Jets was just announced that he's been given permission to seek a trade. Now, Michael Clemens is a 4th-round pick still on a rookie deal. He's been given permission to seek a trade because he doesn't think he's being utilized properly. He wants to leave. You've got guys like, Harold Landry, another older pass rusher, kind of in the vein of like a Trey Hendrickson, who has been allowed to test the market. Deebo Samuel, they've announced, hey, he's going to be allowed to But you know what's happening behind those closed doors? It's because the agents and the owners are sitting down saying, hey, we're all going to meet up in this place since you're here back channeling anyway. Let's have a real conversation about what it's going to take to get your guy through the door this year for training camp. And if he's really out, then let's just do it now ahead of the draft and let's know that. And this is the perfect week to put it out there so we can give teams time to make a plan before free agency. So you're watching all of these names like Jonathan Allen start to come up. And this is where you as a Bills fan have to say, listen, I know what my appetite was 2 weeks ago when I thought about, oh man, we got to make a trade because we want to be just like the Eagles and we need this dominant, oppressive front seven. Now you've got options. And in fact, there's other things you have to look at, right? But just in sticking with trades, the Jonathan Allen thing makes things interesting for me. His age, right? Just the way that everything kind of stacks up for him. He's making $22 million a year, I believe is his cap hit this year. They could be inclined, Washington, to retain salary depending on what you give them. He's on the last year of a deal that has no future money tied to it. Getting better DN play for the Buffalo Bills is a given. We need that. But at the same time, what you also have to get better at is the interior of the defensive line, which is something that they've struggled with forever. I was listening to Doug Farrar on the radio, who has us blocked on Twitter, which is hilarious. I think it's because I made fun of him, like his final mock draft the one year.
Yeah, most likely.
I mean, he scored terribly. We created the game. He was a loser in it, and then he got mad about it, and he doesn't know who we are. So he was talking about what the Eagles did in that Super Bowl and how it wasn't just about, the dominance of four individual players beating one-on-ones. It was the schematics of how they ran stunts across the defensive line, but they did it off tackle, and they did it to the outside, which took their best pass protectors like Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith right out of the equation. And so it's not only having the talent, but it's having the tactics to know how to attack somebody. But in order to do that, you need really good defensive tackles. And the Bills don't have that level of athlete there right now to get away with that consistently. Jonathan Allen could give to some of you. And also he could play different positions across the line. He becomes a far more, if you can't get a Myles Garrett for anything that's reasonable, and you find out that you can't get a Max Crosby deal done because they want multiple firsts plus a player, that's too much. You can't afford to give that up for the Bills. But you might be able to get a Jonathan Allen for something. What? I don't know. But you can make a better deal, I think, for an Allen than you could for a Crosby, just given their age, their cost. The fact that, like Chris, he's going to be 30 this year, Jonathan Allen?
Yeah.
So that means that the contract he gets next might be his last one. So wherever he gets traded, with that $22 million cap hit this year, you could reasonably extend him for a few years and restructure everything and just shovel some money around. Because if you scroll over, does it give the guaranteed money tied into that?
Do you want a cash breakdown?
Yeah, let's take a look at that. Base salary of cash total $16 million. Cash remaining. Okay. Roster bonus, signing bonus. So there's no bonus there other than this, $500,000. So he's got about $1 million worth of bonuses tied to his contract.
So would this be similar to a trade of how we got Amari Cooper?
Kind of. There's not a lot of guarantees left. So you can get that guy, and the cap ramifications might be manageable depending on what you can negotiate with them and what they keep. And then an extension on an extension that allows you to then take this year and move cash around to lower that initial cap hit. It's entirely possible you can make it work. I just think that I love the idea of a better interior player to put next to a Daquan Jones and a Dwayne Carter and a Dwayne Carter,
Rousseau.
No, I'm thinking about this. Your defensive tackle rotation becomes Jonathan Allen, Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver, Dwayne Carter. You could do a lot worse than that. There's AFC. I don't know that there's AFC East teams that would have a better stable of D tackles than that in totality. I think you'd be getting some really talented players at a position of need, and at the same time, better interior play will make your edge players better. I don't know. I think it would give you options, and I don't think that the trade would cost as much because of his age and his cap hit. I don't know. It's very interesting, and it becomes a better idea. Then there's also the talk about the guys who are going to be like, who just aren't negotiating. You know, Matthew Judon. He spent his career as a pretty impactful pass rusher, which is why the Falcons traded for him last year in the last year of his contract with the Patriots. Except they haven't approached him for a contract extension. So looks like he's on the road to being a free agent if they don't hammer something out. I'm sure the Falcons are talking to his agent this week down there at the Combine. But if he were to find a way to free agency, I wouldn't hate the idea. Take a flyer on a Matthew Judon if there's no big trade that you can reasonably swing. Okay. Then I would take a Matthew Judon and then see if I can't get the edge rusher, I would feel better trading for someone like a Jonathan Allen and then signing a guy like this, or maybe Joey Bosa if you can make the numbers work, although he's pretty fragile. That's a question. That's a question for banged up Bills. What's the upshot for Joey Bosa as a free agent? But in any event, I just think that Beane admitting that he's not going to be gun shy about trading picks opens up a world of opportunities, but so does this week. So we as Bills fans need to be open-minded in terms of all of the players that are going to become available. Because if you tell me it's going to cost me 2 firsts and maybe a player to get a Max Crosby on our roster, or I can give you a second in a year where I believe we have 2 seconds, correct? We don't have a third because we traded for Amari Cooper, but I believe we have Minnesota's second from Houston and our own.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you could potentially be talking about maybe a second this year and a 4th next. A second this year and maybe a second next year in exchange for cap considerations when it comes to how much salary Washington retains from Jonathan Allen. And now you still have a 1st-round pick to either go leverage or go find another cost-controlled player who still has high-end physical traits. Yeah, so we have the 1st, 2 seconds, 2 fourths. Yeah, so we have
3 sixths.
You have a lot of options here. And I think if I had to weigh apples to apples, I like the idea of paying a little bit less for a guy a little bit later in his career. A Trey Hendrickson would fall into this category. You're going to give up less because of the age and the contract demands, because this is probably both players' last deal. But it's nice to be able to think about a Bills team that just lost in the AFC Championship game, isn't going to hemorrhage that much significant talent to free agency, and at the same time has the ability to go swing for the fences in a couple spots, be aggressive while also still planning for the future. I do think it's an exciting time in that way. I was also really interested that he and Sean McDermott were in lockstep, like they usually are. You know, I think when it comes to roster building and what they want to accomplish, he and Brandon Beane do a good job of working together. Now, do I think they get the right guy? Probably not. But at least they're on the same page, it feels like, for a lot of things. So the fact that they both got together to give some like joint, almost practiced criticism of Keon Coleman, I saw people, it's been very polarizing for the fan base. But no one can argue with what they saw. Chris, if you can pull up, in fact, what you do is just click Keon Coleman's name right there on that list. Just click his name and then go down game logs. Okay, 2024. So you take a look at where he started the year, and he had a slow start, which most rookies do. I mean, I think the worst one was that game against New England, right? At the end of the year, 10 targets and 2 catches. Like, that's bad. At the start of the year, he was at least getting involved. You start there, 5 for 4, 51 yards, first game. He's in his 3rd game against Jacksonville. He catches his first NFL touchdown. You go down the game log, and at the start of the season, he was really starting to come on. And that game at Seattle was kind of his coming out party, right? Like that in Tennessee were the 2 games where you were like, holy shit, this guy might be the package. And then he gets injured. And then to the commentary that was given, you look at the games after that Seattle game, right? He gets hurt. He goes down on the 3rd of November in a game that we went on to win. He gets injured, leaves the field, doesn't come back until the 15th of December.
There's a Jordan Poyer hit, right?
Mm-hmm. broken wrist, and all of a sudden he's not blocking as well. And also, he's not really fighting for the ball in the air. After starting the year where he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, he started the season with 5 games of 3 or more catches. He finished the season, Chris, down the stretch there. How many 3 or more? 1.
Yeah.
1 game with 3 or more receptions, including the game where they threw the ball to him 10 times. Like, you can't have that deterioration. You just can't. If you're healthy, you need to learn. And if you're not 100% healthy, and I think that was maybe the biggest thing I took away from that. Do you notice in their statements how they talked about the need for them to, like, we need to see him get a little bit tougher and, you know, deal with the adversity a little bit better?
Yeah. I mean, he did have that jet touchdown. That was a contested catch.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That was probably his only contested catch after the injury had happened.
This is the direct quote. I would say probably a little disappointed in his return from injury. I did not see the same player down the stretch from a physicality. Some of the things he needs to use his size for. You know, some of that is youth. Some of that is I'm not sure how many injuries he's had to overcome in season and come back from. That takes a certain experience level and how to deal with an injury and how to come back from it. I think that that's important when it comes to rookies. Look at Dwayne Carter. Dwayne Carter was showing really well. And in that Tennessee game, he looked good. He had a couple plays that really flashed on tape, penetrating into the backfield, disrupting, you know, causing tackles for loss. And then he really didn't make much of an impact after that. You know, he wasn't visible for the remainder of the season when he did return. I think there's something to rookie experience coming back from an injury and trying to figure out, okay, I was hurt enough that I actually can't play. But now I'm back, but am I ready to play at an NFL level? Because it's already a step up in competition. Now you have to find a little bit extra edge to your game. Because you're trying to make up for the fact that you're probably not playing at 100%. You're probably playing at 80. So it's good enough for you to be out there. But when you have to go run block, you have to go use that broken wrist or that fractured wrist that you got. You're going to go have to lean on some guys. You're going to have to hand fight when you're in phase down, you know, in a route. You can't be thinking about whether that hurts, whether it feels uncomfortable or not. And learning how to shut that off is half of the game of football. You know, do you think that defensive linemen are healthy, really, for an entire season?
No. But you pick things up and you work through them and you figure it out. And so in that way, these guys are rookies. And the people who are being a little hyperbolic about the future of Keon Coleman, even though I do have some jokes, I've got some jokes, especially when you look at this year's free agency class. But the reality is, I still think that Keon Coleman entering this year is firmly entrenched as a boundary starter for your football team, isn't he? Yeah.
I do like that both coaches were in lockstep on that. Both your coach and your GM both are agreeing. But again, you listen to that guy. The guys who are not only employing you, but are trying to groom you so that you can get paid on a fat contract, whether it's here or somewhere else, are telling you what you need to fix. It couldn't be more clear. So now all he has to do is open his ears, be willing to take criticism, and go do the work. And I like that. Again, we talked about Beane and his level of transparency. I love it. We've already given you your homework, kid. Go do it. Show up next year. Show us that you're worth an extension. That's it. That's all they're asking. And then I think the most surprising thing to come out of those interviews was the talk about Sean McDermott being against the tush push.
A lot of people are.
Yeah, well, a lot of people being the Green Bay Packers because their quarterback can't do it. That rep that's been, you know, I'll tweet it out at Rockpile Report if you want to go see it. An Eagles fan found the rep of Jordan Love attempting the tush push and just how poorly it went because Jordan Love isn't a big guy. He's not a strong guy. He doesn't have a lot of lower body power when you look at him. His legs are kind of thin. Like, he's just not built like that. So to put him in that kind of position and watch how badly he struggled, it is kind of funny that that's the team that then comes out and goes, well, this thing should be banned. Why? Because you lost to it and your quarterback can't do it?
Nobody can stop it, though.
Well, Trevor Sikkema had a really good point where he goes, he was like, you know how you stop the tush push on fourth and inches or 4th and 1? Defend better on the previous 3 plays. That's what you do. That's how you stop the tush push. Just play better defense for the first 3 downs. And it is something, right? Because you can play the game a little bit differently if you know that you're going to go for it on 4th down. Or you know that you have a play that has a pretty good success rate that you can lean on in those moments. But what makes that funny is the concept that if you actually dig into the numbers, here's Brandon, and I don't disbelieve that that's where Sean McDermott's heart really is when he says this. Hey, you didn't, it's not good. It's not safe. It just seems like a play that doesn't have a lot of skill applied to it, what have you. Do you know that the Bills used the tush push 55 times in the last 3 years with Josh Allen?
Did not know that.
Second most in the NFL over that time span, and more than half of the NFL combined. This according to the geniuses of Twitter. You think about our reliance on that play. Hell, it was the play that got us eliminated from the playoffs. It's the reason that we're not still in the NFL, like we didn't go to a Super Bowl, potentially. So when you hear Sean McDermott saying, hey, this play that we've relied on, and it's kind of been a bread and butter thing in our offense, it's an automatic first down most of the time. Nah, I don't like it. I think it should be banned from the game. Who do you think, like, where does that come from? Do you think that when Sean McDermott joined the rules committee, like, I don't doubt that he takes it seriously, right? But is it that easy to just divorce yourself from what's in your own best interest and just do that job? Or do they only bring in guys who they think are capable of separating church and state and saying, look, I know I'm the Bills head coach and that this rule change might really hurt my football team, but I still want to do it because it feels like the right thing to do.
Yeah, I don't understand what the problem is with it.
It's been called a skill-less play, right? But the question is, who gets to be the adjudicator of that? It's like, oh, it's a play that doesn't take any skill and it does this and it does that and it's not great for player safety. Who gets to decide whether or not it has skill, right? Like Hansel, formerly of Cover One, now kind of doing his own thing. Uber Hansen on Twitter. He says the question that needs to be asked is, what does a vote to ban the tush push mean? Are quarterback sneaks now illegal? Is it illegal to attempt to push a ball carrier forward? Because that was the rule, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, no one else can assist the ball carrier. Like we now know it's a penalty to pull the ball carrier forward. You can't do that. You're also not supposed to be able to push them, but then isn't that kind of what the tush push is?
Yeah.
Like now all of a sudden everybody has to, like, how do you adjudicate this? How do you, I hate these gray area sort of declarations of we're going to eliminate this one thing. It's like, well, it's not just one thing. Like there's a bunch of mechanisms that all combine themselves to make what the tush push is. The offensive line gets lower than normal. The quarterback then drives through the gaps being a predetermined gap. And then at the end of the play, you get a backup running back or someone in there, a fullback, to come in and grab some cheeks. Now, how are you going to stop this from happening? Is it just the pushing motion that you're going to say, hey, you can't push them? Okay. I think that should be a rule anyway, right, Chris?
Yes.
But your offensive line is still going to be able to get low and your quarterback's still going to be able to drive himself forward like that. And that's still dangerous. It's just as dangerous as what they were doing before. So are you going to make a rule that the offensive line has to block at a certain level? Because what about cut blocks? That's a thing.
Yep.
I mean, they're not great. They definitely carry a high risk of injury to defensive players when you're making a cut block. But at the same time, it's the game of football.
If you have a problem with the tush push, why don't you just get good at it? How about that?
That's like the Wildcat. Remember when everybody tried to do the Wildcat and it just blew up in everyone's face?
Ronnie Brown.
Who did we have? Who was the wide receiver from the Jets?
Brad
Smith. The Bills having Brad Smith on the roster for nothing else but like QB3 and Wildcat package. And he was terrible. It was one of the worst things to watch live, a football team trying to execute. These are the types of things where you start trying to attack one specific set of circumstances, but there's no good way to do it. And whatever you do, there will be negative consequence just to the game of football in general. I find that dynamic incredibly interesting, and I don't know how they're going to carry this out. But I also know that the Buffalo Bills will be directly impacted by it if such a rule change occurs. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for us, is it?
Yeah.
Anything that takes away first downs from the Buffalo Bills' second-ranked scoring offense is probably a bad thing. So I'll be watching that as that develops over the course of the offseason with a pretty keen eye. You know what else we've been watching with a keen eye, Chris? Season ticket prices.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Season ticket prices have been announced. And I did think that it was interesting. We got our invoice for the 2025 season tickets. Final season of Ralph C. Wilson Stadium's existence.
For the record, I paid Drew tonight straight cash.
Straight cash, homie. Although you were $5 late.
Yeah, I don't keep $5 in my envelope of cash.
This is the guy who literally paid me $100 and then like $100 in nickels and then took some out just so it wouldn't roll properly.
Yes.
You mean to tell me you don't have
I did
five
that for
singles?
your wedding. I'll get you $5 eventually.
Here's the question. Should we have to pay should we just suck it up and go pay the ticket office to print us a paper ticket for each one of these? The final games at Ralph Wilson Stadium.
I miss having, I don't know if you could tell.
I was going to say, this is...
I miss paper tickets. I miss paper tickets. Like, I'm sure people will be like, that watch this go, how's this thing not filled? I've been watching the show for 2 years. No tickets have been added to this frame. That's because you can't get tickets.
Nope.
Well, you know what I'm going to have to, you know what I'm going to have to do?
What you can do
I'm going to go to a bunch of Bison's games and just go to the box office and get tickets.
What you can do, and I'm debating, do you think it's worth it? I will call and I'll ask what the price is. If we can get all 8, potentially 10 tickets that the Bills play at home this season printed for us in paper copy.
Yeah.
What's the max you'd be willing to pay for that? Is like a once in a lifetime, you'll never be able to get one of these again type of a thing of something you already collect.
Hundreds. I'll pay $100 more just to have paper tickets.
I'm not going to lie. It'll probably end up being $10, $15 a game, but I'll make the call tomorrow and I will find out what that looks like for you. Cause I figured you'd be interested in that.
100%.
I really thought that being the final season in this building, that they would that this was going to be more expensive, to be honest. Only a 12.2% increase in our ticket price from 2024.
Our seats.
Which isn't terrible considering the state of overall inflation. I also find it comical that despite all of our success, we still have one of the best values in the entire NFL. Still, even after all this, just look at the AFC East. The Jets, this is how audacious the Jets are. They lost to the Buffalo Bills, like that late October game. And then 2 days later sent all their season ticket holders an email being like, hey, you have like 14 days. We're going to invoice you for your season tickets and for next year and your money's due. Read the room, Jets front office.
Isn't that's the game, the first game after they fired Saleh?
No, that was I think that was
the last game.
Actually, no, that was the first one.
Because they were going into that game to be, if they had beaten Buffalo, they would have been tied for the division lead. And then their season just took a big old shit.
Because I remember everybody saying, they're like, oh man, they just, they fired their coach, and everybody who fires their coach gets a big swing the following week. That didn't happen for the Jets. Do you know that they, even despite that, so losing to the Bills, having it kind of cemented like, okay, we're not nearly as good as we thought we were going to be. They rolled out a 23.2% ticket increase. That's insanity for a team that has no future. You don't even know who your quarterback's going to be this year. They're talking about paying Justin Fields. They're talking about paying Justin Fields to be their stopgap quarterback. And they had the audacity to raise ticket prices 23%. How many asses would have been in seats here in Buffalo if during the drought they had just randomly come and been like, hey, you know what? We need 25% more.
Oh, dude, that's so simple. We would have been, by now, we would have been playing football in San Antonio.
My first year as Bills season ticket holder, my tickets were $247 for the season. That was 2012. 2012, first year as a season ticket holder. My girlfriend at the time thought I was lying to her about what they cost. She was like, I went to work and I mentioned that you bought season tickets, and people asked how much they were. And when I told them what you told me, they all laughed at me and said that you were lying to me. I was like, why? First of all, I don't care about you enough to lie to you. Which, I mean, that's its own problem. But also, she was like, no, but you can just tell me. You can just tell me what you really paid. I'm like, lady, they have to give these things away in December. I remember being in those late November rainy games against the Browns where there's 30,000 people in the building and the tickets are going for $16 on StubHub. No one cares about this. You can't raise ticket prices. Now imagine living there and having the Bills come to you and go, hey, assholes, we hired Rex Ryan. We still think this is going to be crap, but give us another $100 a year. It's the worst. You look at Miami right now, like when you look at what the Bills are running this season, it's about $1,200 and change a seat. Average.
For the season.
Per seat. Miami is averaging $1,734 a seat. This is a team, like one of the caveats of having season tickets is that you're the first in line for playoff tickets if you want them. Chris, wasn't that the reason you got in?
Yeah.
It was because you want to be there for the playoffs. The Miami Dolphins have not had a home playoff game since 2009, and they lost to the Ravens 27-9. Who is buying these season tickets? For what? What are you buying them for? Chris, there's no upshot for this.
None.
Not at that price. The Patriots cost an average of $2,048 a seat. No home playoff games since Tom Brady lost to Tennessee and threw a pick six on his final pass in a Patriots uniform. I still have that DVR'd and I watch it sometimes when I'm in a bad mood. It's just like that play will just forever. Just this. He's so demoralized at the state of the game. He's not even angry. He's just dejected. It's like, yes, Tom Brady. I needed that. Inject that into my veins. They somehow cost more than everybody else in the entire division. I know that season tickets are a luxury and that I'm lucky to have them. It's not lost on me. But how demoralized are you if you're another fan of football in the AFC East? And you have to look at this and go, I'm paying a giant premium for what? For what? Meanwhile, the cheapest team in the division just went 10-0 at home, 5 straight division crowns, and has had a wild card playoff game every year. What a time to be alive. It would be kind of fucked up if they missed the playoffs, sure, wouldn't it? Just like randomly.
Oh,
just
yeah.
out of nowhere, the last year in the building, they're like, hey, guys.
That would suck.
Remember how you thought Billsy was dead? Gotcha. I'm really hoping I didn't just speak that into existence, because that would be a fucking bummer. And then finally, I want to talk about this before we go. Chris, what are we at? How much time we got?
54 minutes.
Perfect. NFL team report cards came out today. And I love this stuff. Like, I know not a lot of people care. For me, one of the things that I'm always fascinated about isn't just the game of football that you see on the field and the X's and O's of it. I'm fascinated with how things work within the business of football. I like kind of understanding the hierarchy of teams and how they work things behind the scenes, who reports to who makes what decisions. I also like, because this is basically Glassdoor. It's Glassdoor for the NFL, where people can anonymously leave ratings and they can leave reviews. And I don't know. I think it sends a message to other players and also tells the fans a little bit about what might be going on behind closed doors. And in some cases, it's interesting the conclusions you can start to draw based on what you're seeing. You know, I love this where you have the Commanders who went from 32nd in the NFL in total aggregate score to 11th the second Dan Snyder leaves. It's almost like that man was just a dark cloud over everything that he touched. How about the Jets owner? Like, there's a grade for ownership, and the players of the New York Jets gave him the worst grade out of any owner in the entire NFL with an F-. Because if you want to...
This just says F on the NFLPA website.
Okay, is it F?
Yeah.
Then, Chris, oh, that's hilarious. The maybe I'm thinking F- because I'm thinking of that drop of ours.
Yeah.
You folks fell on your face. You get an F- in my book. But when you think about that as a whole, if you look at how it, like, Chris, if you can sort that for ownership, click that column. It is interesting how the NFLPA makes this sortable and researchable. You look at who's at the top for owners. It's not who you'd think, right? Like, first of all, the Wilfs in Minnesota, I mean, I guess, maybe. I don't know anything about them. I never hear about them. But maybe that's part of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Arthur Blank.
Arthur Blank, I think he's well regarded.
Yep.
Although he does kind of look like an Italian Dracula.
Yeah.
Like, he looks like a guy who'd be super comfortable in an ascot with long teeth, and he's ancient and yet still just kind of craggling around. But then here's what I love. Dave Tepper, if you go down to the very bottom, the lowest scoring ownership groups. Bidwell's there in Arizona. David Tepper in Carolina, coming in at 31st. And I think you'd agree that that's about right.
Yeah.
Right? The Cardinals, no one's going to say that their ownership group is great. In fact, John Fina, I'm not trying to name drop, but drinking beers with John Fina at O'Neill's a couple years ago, and just he's regaling us with stories about like what happened to him after he left Buffalo. Because, you know, we had talked about how cool it was that he was being brought back into the fold, and just how the team, after all these years of kind of doing wrong by veteran players, was really kind of revamping its outreach programs and really getting older players re-involved in the franchise, and how cool that was for them, for the fan base. And he brought up what his experience at the Arizona Cardinals was like. And I can distinctly remember a story where he was there, and you get your you get your check, right, Chris, like game check. And then you see the deductions, and there's obviously your taxes, and there's your whatever other withholdings that you might have. And then there's other deductions, like if you had, because you can buy tickets for friends and family, and they just deduct it straight from your paycheck. So you have these, and then all of a sudden there's this weird line item he sees, and he's like, I don't recognize that. And then in the same envelope with his check is an itemized list that makes up this deduction from his check. And on that, Chris, is towel service, And he goes and he asks the question of the trainers, like, hey, what is this? And they go, well, you've been showering here, so every day you shower here, we charge you to wash the towels.
Wild.
You want NFL players in your fucking building not showering? Or is this just a cash grab by a broke-ass franchise? That was the type of stuff that was going on back then in like the early 2000s. And it's hilarious to see that it's still going on. And yet despite that, with David Tepper being an over-controlling dick and the Cardinals from one ownership group to the next just being misers, Woody Johnson scored the worst. And I find it interesting because people tend to think of Woody Johnson as this meddling jerk, right? Oh, he's too involved and he hires this guy and he hires that guy. He met with Aaron Rodgers and they decided the fate of Robert Saleh or however you believe it went down. Realistically, you shouldn't be surprised. They've going back to the day when Ike Enemkpali punched out Geno Smith in the locker room. This has been a dysfunctional franchise. Your locker room is constantly being talked about as being fractured, or there's divisions in the locker room. But it doesn't matter who's in charge or who's your quarterback. It always exists. You always have impotent coaching. You've always got misguided GMs. There's only one constant among all of this. So Chris, it's got to be Woody, right?
Yes.
And I just find it funny that Woody Johnson scored so poorly for doing all of the same things that Jerry Jones does. Look where Jerry Jones scored, Chris. Scroll up there.
You got a B.
He got a B. He got the same grade Terry Pagula got. Can we agree T-Pegs is probably a slightly better owner than Jerry Jones? If for nothing else, he keeps his mouth shut and he gets out of the way.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to see the way that some of these things break out and just some of the dynamics around the league. Now, for the Buffalo Bills part, there are some things, right? Like there's some things that we could talk about in terms of meaning and what's meaningful and what's not. Yeah, I look at the Buffalo Bills report card here in front of me. They've got great nutrition, dietitian, average, to come in 27th out of 32 teams, but a B minus. Food and dining, they get a B minus, which I think is bullshit because I know for a fact that Reed has taken our Q42 chicken rub into that cafeteria and absolutely crushed with it. I know that for a fact. Treatment of families I found interesting. The Jaguars got an F in that category. Meanwhile, the Bills got a B plus. And I also notice, and you'll hear this if you listen to the combine pressers, whenever you ask Sean McDermott about a coach who joined his staff or left his staff, he doesn't just talk about the player. He talks about the player and their family. Because I really do believe that the Bills believe that that's important. They believe and build, like that's part of the culture that they're establishing here is that we are a family. And in that way, we want to have this togetherness. And so I want these coaches to recognize we're not just hiring you. We are bringing your family. You're bringing them with you. They're part of this thing too. And they treat players' families, coaches' families, and everybody involved very well. This one's going to rankle Kyle Trimble, Chris, the training staff. And maybe it plays into why they fired their
strength and conditioning coach. 75% of Bills players reported that they receive enough one-on-one treatment, which ranked 27th out of that. 25% of the roster doesn't think they get enough PT. Oh, wow. It's almost like they should hire someone.
It's almost like there's somebody out there who might be able to help them with that.
Yeah.
The players feel that their training staff slightly contributes to their overall success. Slightly, on average. Which isn't good. Like that's an indictment of what's been going on there from a conditioning standpoint. I also love the team travel. The fact that we finished last in the NFL this year, right? 32nd out of 32 teams. Only 35% of the players feel like they have a comfortable amount of personal space on a team flight. They don't think it's efficient. They all think it's inefficient. They ranked last in that category. They feel like it's the worst part of being a member of the Buffalo Bills franchise is travel.
You know what we have this year? At Pittsburgh, at Cleveland. Take a bus.
This is what I was going to say. I feel like there are certain times where you can kind of get your head up your own ass sometimes. about certain things. And this is one of them. I get it. It would be nice to sit in first class and fly to another city to go play a football game and have that extra space and everything else. For reasons we're about to talk about in a minute, I sometimes think you almost want people to have a little bit of a rough ride. You want things to be uncomfortable. They may not love it, but also, Chris, when the lay fan gets, or the lay person hears that and goes, oh, it's the owner being cheap, and this is this and that's that. As if any of you have ever flown in first class. Chris, have you flown in first class ever in your life?
Yeah. I flew first class, I think, from Atlanta to Syracuse.
To Syracuse? I don't think that. If you're taking a flight direct to Syracuse, I don't think that was first class, sir.
Yeah, it was.
They might have called it that.
No, it was first class. It was Delta.
I'm just happy it didn't flip over on it.
No, we didn't go to Toronto. We went to Syracuse.
I have never sat first class. But that's fine. I don't need first class. I've never needed that.
Yeah, because if you sit in first class, the benefit of first class is
ruined?
No. If you sit in first class, the benefit of sitting in first class is that you have leg room, except you need arm room.
This is what I love about this. You've got a bunch of people who have never flown first class, or at least who like you guys. You don't travel. What do you care? There's a bunch of millionaires crying that their flight wasn't comfortable enough. Ooh. Guess what? Toughen up, right? We all make sacrifices. Do you want other niceties? You got to give something up for them. You can, Chris, that's what they get paid millions of dollars for. So that when they go on vacation with their families, they can go fly, what is it? Emirates Air or whatever takes you to Dubai, and it's got sleeping quarters and everything else. You can go do that on your own dime. I mean, we know T-Pegs is cheap, but that's beside the point. I think that this is much ado about nothing, right? Because by comparison to how you would travel on your own as the layperson, they still have it pretty good. And then the overall ranking was 23rd out of 32 teams. And I find that to be like you look at some of these teams, like who finished at the top?
For what, travel?
Just everything in general.
Oh, Miami.
Miami finished number one in the NFL, and I think that they are the perfect thing. You look at this across the board, they got A's. They got A's for everything. They got A's for the weight room, the training staff, the locker room, the team travel, the head coach. Everything in Miami is mint. And the head coach one, too, gets me, right?
A plus.
But everything in Miami is amazing. Why aren't you a better football team? Why are you constantly plagued with injuries as a football team if your training and conditioning staff is really up to snuff?
Yep. They're also soft.
If they're putting you through your paces the way you need to be as an NFL football team, you're not supposed to like them. So the fact that their entire team loves the Dolphins, everybody who's in there is great. And as I just talked about, they haven't hosted a playoff game since 2009. They're looking at 20 years of not having a home playoff game in front of their season ticket holder fans. It's like there's something to this. You take a look as you look at the top of this and you go down some of the scoring and you look at where teams fall. Now, you don't have to be bad. I'm not saying that you have to be bad in terms of how your team views you to be successful. You know, the days of hard-nosed, Vince Lombardi football probably don't fly anymore. There's a certain amount of coddling, Chris. You see it in hockey all the time. There's a different attitude you have to take to athletes now. You just have to. Otherwise, you can't. That's why Nick Saban bailed out of the NFL and went straight back to college. It takes a different attitude and a different handling of these guys. But if you look at the teams that scored the highest in terms of their internal report cards, there's not a lot of success to be found. You know, you've got some that score higher, like the Ravens or
Baltimore would be the highest score with playoff consistency.
Sure, but you know who finished third is the Atlanta Falcons.
Okay, they're not in the playoffs consistently. None of these teams are.
No.
Except for the Ravens.
So when you can't offer a player success, Like right now, what the Bills have the ability to do is go out to free agents on the market and say, hey, yeah, you're going to get stuck in a bunch of shitbag flights. We're not paying for any cushy amenities. You can do that out of your own pocket if you'd like to. But realistically, if you want to go win a Super Bowl, you come here because we have a culture, we've got a quarterback, we've got a super talented roster. That puts us 23rd in the eyes of the players in terms of our amenities and the things we offer them. But you know what we offer them? A chance at greatness. You know who can't say that? The Falcons, the Dolphins,
the Raiders,
the Broncos, the Raiders, the Bears, who finished middle of the pack at 14th. But as you go on down the line and you look at where these guys fall, that's my resounding. The Cowboys are 10th best. Everything's bigger in Texas, except for the win totals, right? How many playoff wins do you have, Dallas? But that's cool that your players love being there. It's cool that they think you're better. I mean, the Detroit Lions might be the most recently successful franchise, and they scored 9th. That's good. I would rather be where the Buffalo Bills are in totality. I would. Now, are there obvious rooms for improvement? Yes. You want your players well fed. You want to make sure your team isn't nickel and diming them. I mean, what is it? The Bengals refuse to give their players breakfast?
That makes sense.
Good luck getting them to show up for early morning workouts.
I don't know. Does Skyline Chili offer a breakfast menu?
No, because they don't want the drizzling shits on the practice field. No, I think that well, it's interesting seeing what goes on behind the curtain, right? In how players kind of glass door review their team. And they talk about what they think about the coaching and everything else. You know, this is what they like about the training staff, and this is what they like about things. When you look at the teams that say they love their coach, the Dolphins, the Steelers, the Cardinals, the Bengals, the Colts. Like, I'm looking at all these coaches that got A's, the Seattle Seahawks. A- got given to the Raiders coach and to the Panthers coach.
The Titans.
The Titans coach got an A-. I don't see a lot of winning here. So I'm fine. You know what? You want to knock Sean McDermott and Terry Pagula and everybody else for creating a substandard environment compared to some of these cushier franchises. Go ahead and do it. I just know what I see. And I know that what I'm seeing is that some of these franchises who accomplish nothing have really nothing else to offer other than, hey, come here as a free agent, we'll make your life easy. That's not the story here in Buffalo. The narrative here in Buffalo is you're going to have to come here and work your ass off, and you might not get, there's not many frills to it, other than you might get to touch a Lombardi if everything goes right. I'd rather live in that world, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So as a fan, I try not to get all up my feelings about it. I recommend you all do the same. Guys, this has been fun, but we got to get the hell out of here. I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger. And this has been your Rock Pile Report.